Ethan never imagined life could change so drastically in such a short time. At 26, he had finally found a balance between work, love, and purpose. As a mechanic in a small garage just outside Asheville, North Carolina, he lived a simple but honest life. Everything seemed to fall into place when he met Claire, a kind, warm-hearted young schoolteacher who cherished the little things. They got married just a few months later in a quiet backyard ceremony at Claire's childhood home, the same house she now insisted they live in together. Claire was an only child and deeply attached to her mother Linda, a 46-year-old woman who still carried herself with elegance and charm despite years of widowhood. She had raised Claire alone after her husband's passing and longed to keep her family close. Claire believed that living under one roof would only strengthen the love between them all. Ethan, though a bit hesitant, agreed. He wanted to make his wife happy, and Linda seemed warm and welcoming enough. At first, everything felt right. They shared cozy dinners, laughed at old stories, and split household chores. Life was peaceful, but that peace wouldn't last. If you enjoy intense stories full of twists and emotional depth, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Here, every story challenges what you thought was possible. As the weeks passed, Ethan began noticing subtle things that unsettled him. Linda always seemed to be nearby, sometimes a little too nearby. Her compliments toward him started to feel more like flirtation than politeness. When Claire left for work, Linda would use the opportunity to strike up long personal conversations, often mentioning how hard it was to be alone and how Ethan's presence made her feel alive again. Ethan tried not to overthink it. He kept telling himself it was just maternal affection, nothing more. After all, who would dare think such things about their own mother-in-law? Still, an uneasy feeling was starting to grow. What was meant to be the beginning of a joyful family life was starting to shift into something unclear, something he couldn't quite name. Deep down, he knew something felt wrong, but he had no idea just how intense the storm ahead would be. Ethan began to dread the hours when Claire wasn't home. What once felt like peaceful solitude now had an invisible weight pressing down on him. Linda's presence, once comforting, was starting to feel suffocating. She was always there, in the kitchen, in the living room, sometimes even standing silently in the hallway waiting to make small talk. But it wasn't the conversations themselves that bothered him. It was how she spoke to him. The way her eyes lingered just a second too long, the subtle shift in her tone that made his skin crawl. One evening, after Claire had left to visit her father's side of the family for a few days, Ethan was fixing a leaky cabinet hinge in the laundry room. Linda walked in without a word, wearing a silky robe that barely clung to her shoulders. "You're really good with your hands," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan stiffened. He didn't look up. "Just trying to help out," he muttered. She moved closer, too close. "It's been a long time since there was a man in this house," she added, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan stood, wiped his hands on a rag, and stepped away. "I should probably check on dinner," he said quickly, trying to keep his tone polite but firm. Linda just laughed softly. "Don't be so shy, Ethan. We're family now, remember." Her words echoed in his mind long after she left the room. From that moment on, Ethan avoided being alone with her. He'd wake up early, leave the house before she was up, and come home late under the excuse of extra work. Still, Linda always found a way to intercept him. A cup of tea left waiting, a shoulder rub offered under the guise of kindness, or a compliment that made his stomach turn. The worst part wasn't even the behaviour itself, but the fear that no one would believe him if he spoke up. He didn't dare tell Claire. She adored her mother, and the bond between them was unshakable. If he accused Linda of something so disturbing, what would that do to Claire? Would she think he was paranoid, or worse, lying? The anxiety gnawed at him day and night, and the isolation grew unbearable. His home, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt like a minefield where one wrong move could destroy everything. He told himself to be patient. Maybe it would pass. Maybe Linda was just lonely, confused. But deep down, Ethan knew better. This wasn't confusion. It was control, and it was just getting started. Ethan had always been raised to show respect, especially to elders and family. He wasn't someone who yelled or accused without proof. He believed in patience, in boundaries, in giving people the benefit of the doubt. But Linda was pushing every one of those beliefs to their breaking point. It started with harmless touches. A hand on his shoulder that lingered too long, a brush of her fingers when handing him a glass of water. Then came the comments. "Claire's lucky," she said one afternoon while watching him mow the lawn. A real man who works with his hands. That's rare these days. Ethan forced a polite smile but didn't respond. He didn't want to encourage anything. He just wanted peace. The more he ignored it, the bolder Linda became. One evening, Claire was running late from a school meeting. Ethan sat alone on the couch, flipping channels to distract himself. Linda entered the room, this time in tight workout clothes, claiming she'd just finished a yoga video. She sat down next to him, closer than necessary, and sighed. "You know, Ethan, I don't think Claire really appreciates how lucky she is to have you." He turned to her, startled. "I think she does," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Linda tilted her head and smiled, but there was something predatory behind her eyes. "Maybe, but if she doesn't, someone else might." That night, Ethan barely slept. He lay awake beside Claire, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what was happening. And more importantly, why? Was Linda testing him, playing some kind of twisted game, or was she seriously trying to seduce him? The thought made him feel sick, and yet he still didn't tell Claire. He didn't want to hurt her, didn't want to be the one to shatter her image of the woman who had raised her alone. He was trapped, cornered by decency, fear, and guilt. He started making excuses to be out of the house more often, extra hours at the garage, errands that didn't exist. But even when he was home, he kept his guard up. Every word, every movement around Linda was calculated, friendly, but distant, polite, but unwelcoming. It was exhausting, and Linda noticed. She started acting colder when Claire was around, giving Ethan sharp glances and snide remarks that no one else seemed to catch. It was as if she were warning him, a silent reminder that she still held the upper hand. Ethan was running out of options. He couldn't keep playing this game. He couldn't keep pretending. Something had to change. But he had no idea how dangerous things were about to get. It was a Friday evening, and the house was unusually quiet. Claire had gone out of town for the weekend to attend a teachers' conference in Raleigh. Ethan had tried to go with her, but Claire insisted he stay. The car needed servicing, and the garage had been short-staffed all week. "Mom will keep you company," she'd said cheerfully, completely unaware of the growing storm beneath her roof. Ethan didn't want to be alone in the house with Linda, but he had no excuse strong enough to avoid it. That night he ate dinner by himself, washed the dishes, and retreated to the den to watch TV, hoping to ride out the evening in peace. But peace wasn't coming. Around 9 p.m. he heard footsteps behind him. Turning, he saw Linda standing in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of wine. "You look tense," she said softly, stepping into the room. "Thought you might need this." "I'm good, thanks," Ethan replied quickly, trying not to make eye contact. She walked over anyway, setting one of the glasses on the coffee table. "You work too hard," she added, lowering herself onto the couch next to him, again too close. Her robe hung loosely from her shoulders, revealing far more than Ethan was comfortable with. "I'm tired, Linda," he said, standing up and walking toward the hallway. "Think I'll turn in early." But before he could take a step, she was behind him. He felt her hand wrap gently around his wrist, not forceful, but firm enough to stop him. "Ethan, wait," she whispered. "Just talk to me." He turned slowly, uneasy. "What's going on with you?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Her expression shifted. "Since James died, I felt invisible," she said, her eyes glassy. "And then you came along, kind, patient, real. You make me feel seen again." Ethan froze. "Linda, I'm married to your daughter," he said, every word laced with restraint. "I respect you, but this isn't okay." She stepped closer. "Claire doesn't have to know," she said, barely above a breath. "We can keep this between us." That was the moment everything shattered. Ethan backed away, heart racing. "This has to stop, right now." Linda's eyes hardened. The warmth vanished. "Are you sure you want to say that?" she said coldly. "Because if I tell Claire my version of things, who do you think she'll believe?" The blood drained from Ethan's face. For a moment, the room stood still. He didn't respond. He turned and walked straight to the guest bedroom. locking the door behind him. The glass of wine still sat untouched on the table, a silent witness to everything that had just unfolded. That night, Ethan lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling in the dark. This wasn't just discomfort anymore. This was war. Ethan didn't sleep that night. His mind raced, running through every possible outcome. If he told Claire the truth, would she believe him? Or would Linda twist the story first and poison her against him? That fear was real now. No longer irrational paranoia, but a distinct possibility after what Linda had said. The next morning, Ethan left the house before the sun came up. He didn't even eat. He just grabbed his keys and drove aimlessly for a while before parking outside the garage. It wasn't open yet, but being alone in the lot felt safer than being at home. His hands shook as he tried to sip coffee from a paper cup. What had started as unease was now something darker, dread. When he returned home later that evening, the house was quiet. Claire was still out of town, and Linda, to his relief, wasn't in sight. For the first time in days, he dared to breathe a little easier. But that brief moment of calm wouldn't last. He was halfway up the stairs when he heard Linda's voice behind him. "You left early," she said. Her tone was flat, neutral but tense. "I had work," Ethan replied without turning around. "You're avoiding me," she continued, still calm, still composed. "I'm trying to keep things respectful," he said, keeping his back to her. Then came the shift, the one he had been dreading. Linda stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall. "Ethan," she said slowly, "what do you think Claire would say if I told her you came on to me while she was gone?" Ethan turned around in disbelief. "That's not true." "Doesn't matter," she said, her voice cold. "All it takes is the suggestion, a few tears, the right timing. You think she won't believe her own mother?" It was like being punched without being touched. "You're threatening me," Ethan said, voice low. "I'm protecting myself," Linda replied smoothly, "and maybe giving you a chance to think things through." There it was, the line that had been crossed. No more subtle glances, no more suggestive comments. This was a weaponized ultimatum. Comply or risk losing everything. Ethan didn't respond. He simply walked past her, locked himself in the bedroom, and sat at the edge of the bed in silence. The woman who had raised his wife was now trying to destroy their marriage, unless he surrendered to something he could never live with. He realized then that silence wouldn't protect him anymore. It would only tighten the noose. But how do you speak up when the truth sounds like betrayal? The days that followed were some of the longest of Ethan's life. He functioned like a ghost in his own home, speaking only when spoken to, avoiding eye contact, moving through rooms like he was walking on glass. The silence he clung to had become unbearable, yet it was the only shield he had. One wrong word, one wrong move, and Linda could twist the truth and flip his life upside down. Claire returned on Sunday evening, full of stories from her trip and unaware of the war zone she was walking into. She hugged Ethan tightly, kissed his cheek, and told him how much she missed him. Ethan forced a smile, trying to push down the guilt and fear that twisted in his gut. He wanted to tell her everything. He almost did, more than once, but every time he opened his mouth, the memory of Linda's cold threat stopped him. And Linda? She acted as though nothing had happened. She greeted Claire with joy, laughed at the dinner table, and even complimented Ethan's cooking that night. It was all an act, and Ethan knew it. Every word from her lips was calculated, every smile loaded with warning. Beneath the surface, there was a silent message. "Don't forget what I can do." At night, Ethan barely slept. He would lie next to Claire, listening to her steady breathing, wondering if this secret was already beginning to corrode the very thing he was trying to protect. He found himself staring at her, asking silently, "Would you believe me? Would you still love me if I told you what your mother really is?" He began withdrawing, less talkative, more distracted, quicker to anger. Claire noticed. "You've been different lately," she said one evening. "Is everything okay?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Just tired. Work's been a lot." She accepted the excuse, but didn't look convinced. Meanwhile, Linda continued her campaign of quiet sabotage. She dropped subtle comments in front of Claire, like, "Ethan seems stressed lately. I hope everything's okay between you two." Or she'd casually mention that Ethan had been acting acting distant, as if she were a concerned bystander, not the cause of his distress. Ethan was suffocating. His home had become a trap, and he was the only one who knew it. His mind was unraveling, torn between loyalty to his wife and the unbearable weight of a truth too dangerous to share. But silence had stopped being safe. It was eating him alive, and deep down Ethan began to understand the longer he waited, the more power Linda would have. The only way out was to confront it, even if it meant risking everything. It happened on a Wednesday night, one of those quiet, uneventful evenings that felt no different from the others. But something inside Ethan finally snapped. He was sitting at the dinner table with Claire, staring down at a plate of untouched food, while Linda talked cheerfully about a new book she was reading. Her voice was calm, her demeanour light, but every word felt like a dagger. She was acting. Again. And Ethan couldn't take it anymore. Claire reached across the table and gently touched his hand. "Babe," she said softly, "you've barely said a word. Talk to me, please." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes were filled with concern, not suspicion. She wasn't accusing. She wasn't distant. She was still his Claire. And in that moment, he realized something important. If he didn't speak now, he might never get the chance again. Later that night, after Linda had gone to bed, Ethan and Claire sat together in their room. She was brushing her hair, sitting at the edge of the bed when Ethan finally said it. "Claire, I need to tell you something, and it's not easy." She froze mid-brush and looked at him in the mirror. "You're scaring me." "I don't mean to," he said. His voice was low but steady. "But I can't stay silent anymore." He took a deep breath and began telling her everything, from the subtle remarks to the touchy gestures, and from the night Linda made her intentions clear to the threat she used to silence him. He didn't exaggerate, he didn't dramatize, he just told the truth. Claire sat still the entire time, eyes fixed on the floor, her hands clenched in her lap. As Ethan finished, there was a long, painful silence between them. Finally she looked up, her eyes were glossy. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I was scared," Ethan admitted. "I didn't know if you'd believe me. I didn't want to hurt you. Or lose you." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't move away. I can't believe my own mother would do something like that." "I didn't want you to have to choose," Ethan said. "But I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. It's not. It hasn't been for a while." Claire stood up and paced the room, wiping at her cheeks. She didn't yell, she didn't break down, but the pain in her face said everything. "I need to talk to her," she said, after a long pause. "Tomorrow," Ethan nodded. He didn't know what that conversation would look like. He didn't know if Linda would deny everything or come clean. But for the first time in weeks, he felt something new. Relief. The next morning was unlike any other. The air in the house felt heavy, not just with tension, but with dread. Claire didn't say much as she got ready. Her movements were slow, focused. Ethan could tell she was preparing herself for something painful. He offered to stay in the room to support her, but she gently shook her head. "This is between me and her," she said. Linda was in the kitchen, humming softly as she poured coffee, as if nothing were wrong. But the moment Claire entered, that humming stopped. "Mom," Claire said, her voice calm but firm, "we need to talk, now." Linda turned, her smile flickering. "Of course, honey. What's going on?" "Don't play dumb," Claire said sharply. "Ethan told me everything." The colour drained from Linda's face, but she recovered quickly. "Everything? What does that mean?" "You know exactly what it means." Claire's voice cracked slightly, but she didn't back down. "The flirting, the touching, the threats. He told me what happened when I was out of town." For a moment, Linda said nothing. Her hands trembled as she set down the coffee cup. "Claire, mean to." "Stop," Claire interrupted. "Don't twist this. I want the truth. Did you do those things?" Silence. Then, slowly, Linda's shoulders dropped. She looked older, smaller, not the composed woman who had always held herself with pride. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes?" Claire's breath hitched. "Why?" Tears welled in Linda's eyes, and for once she didn't try to hide them. "I was lonely," she said. "Since your father died, I've been alone for so long. When Ethan moved in, he brought something into this house I hadn't felt in years. Warmth. Attention. I didn't want to hurt you. I just didn't know how to handle it." Claire's face crumpled. "You didn't want to hurt me? You tried to destroy my marriage." I wasn't thinking clearly, Linda sobbed. I crossed a line, I know that, but please, I'm still your mother. Claire stepped back, her hands were shaking. I don't know who you are right now. Ethan stood in the hallway, listening from just out of sight. He didn't want to intrude, but every word felt like a release. The pressure, the silence, the guilt, all unravelling into the open. Claire didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face, staring at the woman who raised her and betrayed her. I need space, she said at last. From you. From all of this. Linda tried to speak, but Claire was already walking away. And just like that, the truth, raw and unforgiving, had finally come out. The house was silent that night. Claire didn't speak much after the confrontation. She stayed in the bedroom with the door closed, staring out the window for what felt like hours. Ethan stayed nearby, giving her space but ready if she needed him. He knew she was unravelling inside, torn between grief, betrayal, and a need to protect what was left of her world. The next morning, Claire made a decision. She sat at the kitchen table across from Linda, the woman who had raised her, protected her, sacrificed for her, and yet now stood as the source of her deepest emotional wound. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. I'm not cutting you out of my life, she said, but I need time and distance. Linda's expression was blank at first. Then slowly she nodded. I understand. I hope one day I can forgive you, Claire continued, but that won't happen in this house. Ethan and I are moving out. There was no argument, no begging, just a quiet, resigned acceptance. Linda had crossed a line that could never be erased, only acknowledged and lived with. Within a week, Ethan and Claire packed their things and moved into a modest apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, thin walls, a leaky faucet, but it was theirs. More importantly, it was safe, a place free from tension, from manipulation, from fear. The first few weeks were hard. Claire cried often, sometimes in the middle of dinner, sometimes in Ethan's arms, sometimes alone in the bathroom with the door closed. Ethan didn't push. He let her grieve in her own way, but he never left her side. They talked more, really talked, about boundaries, about trust, about how close they came to losing each other, and slowly the weight began to lift. Linda reached out a few times, short messages, apologies, pleas for understanding. Claire replied once, respectfully but firmly, explaining that healing would take time and that rebuilding trust couldn't be rushed or demanded. Ethan, for his part, never said a word to Linda again, not out of hatred, but out of a need to protect what he had nearly lost. Time passed, seasons changed, and though the wound remained, it began to scar, a reminder of the fire they had walked through together, a painful, necessary scar that told them they had survived something many couples wouldn't. In the end, Ethan and Claire didn't just rebuild, they reinvented. Their marriage wasn't the same as before. It was stronger, wiser, hardened by betrayal, but softened by grace. They learned that love isn't just about joy or comfort. Sometimes it's about standing in the storm, hand in hand, choosing each other even when everything threatens to pull you apart. And as for Linda, she stayed in the house alone, surrounded by memories and regrets. Her choices cost her more than she expected. Not just her daughter's trust, but her place in her life. Some lines, once crossed, don't get redrawn. They become boundaries, and some homes, once broken, can never feel like home again. If this story moved you, imagine what's coming next. Subscribe now and turn on notifications because some truths are too powerful to ignore.